She had walked the rugged trails of the Wild West with a pistol in hand and a fierce determination in her heart. She's Pearl Hart, Arizona's infamous Lady Bandit. Her daring feats and liberal personality made her a legend in her own time. Her story continues to engage and intrigue us today. From carriage robberies to prison escapes, Pearl Hart's life is filled with adventure, danger, and drama. Join us as we explore the life and legacy of one of the most fascinating women of the Old West, Pearl Hart. Remember to hit the like button because it helps us a lot. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and press the notification bell to not miss the upcoming interesting videos. She was born Pearl Taylor of French descent in Lindsay, Ontario, Canada. Pearl grew up in a respectable and educated middle-class family, but her life took a dark turn when she fell deeply in love with a charming gambler named Frederick Hart at the age of 17. Pearl's decision to run away with Hart is a mistake that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Hart is known to be a bartender, but he often squanders his money on gambling, leaving Pearl to fend for himself. Worse still, he was a heavy drinker and often turned violent. Despite the dreams Pearl has of a better life with Hart, the reality is one disappointment after another. In 1893, Pearl and Fred attended a Columbian exposition in Chicago, Illinois. Fred works as a side gig while Pearl manages to secure some odd jobs. While participating in the exhibition, Pearl was fascinated by the performances of the Wild West and was especially attracted to Annie Oakley, whom she had seen before. She also attended the Women's Gallery, where she heard speeches by famous women, including Julia Ward Howe, a well-known poet and women's activist. Pearl is mesmerized by the legends and heroes of the Wild West and quickly finds the courage to leave her abusive husband behind. She boarded a train to Trinidad, Colorado, where she began singing at a pub. However, her new life was short-lived as she soon discovered that she was pregnant with Frederick's child. Pearl returned to her family in Canada, where she gave birth to a son. Although she has just assumed the role of a mother, Pearl's love of adventure has not faded. She decided to leave her son with her mother and once again headed west, eventually reaching Phoenix, Arizona. However, her expectations of the Wild West were quickly dashed. Instead of being as flashy and glamorous as she had imagined, Pearl found herself working as a chef in a coffee shop and taking on a job doing laundry to make ends meet. Pearl's struggles are not unique. Women in the late 1800s faced significant barriers, both social and economic. Many are forced to rely on male financial support and have few opportunities to pursue their own ambitions. Pearl's turbulent relationship with her estranged husband, Frederick, will take a new turn in 1895. Despite their past troubles, Frederick begs Pearl to return to him and promises to get a stable job. True to his promise, he becomes a manager and bartender at a local hotel. The couple seemed happier this time around, but their beginnings of affluence led to misdeeds. They began regularly spending the night at Washington street pubs and casinos, where Pearl fell into addiction, smoking, drinking, and using drugs like marijuana and morphine. Whatever will come, will come. Their marital problems resurfaced, and after the birth of their second child, a baby girl, Fred becomes bored and tired. In 1898, during a violent argument between the couple, Fred, in a fit of rage, knocked Pearl unconscious and let her ride with Teddy Roosevelt's Rough Riders in Cuba. Pearl returns to her parents, but the call of the Wild West prompted her, and she soon left her second child behind to return to Arizona. However, life in the West was once again difficult for her, and Pearl struggled to make ends meet working odd jobs in the mining camps. Her depression got worse and worse, and she tried to take her own life many times, but luckily was saved by acquaintances. In 1899, Pearl Hart ran into a miner named Joe Boot. She fell into despair after receiving a letter from her brother informing her of her mother's illness and the need for medical treatment. Because of the difficult situation at the time, she turns to Joe for advice. Joe hatches a plan to rob the elderly men. Men would walk into their rooms, seduced by Pearl's promise of romance. Then Joe suddenly knocked him down and stole the money. But this wasn't enough to meet their needs, so they decided to take a riskier approach and rob a carriage. After careful planning, Pearl disguises herself as a man, cuts her hair, and puts on men's clothes. On May 30th, 1899, they carried out their plan, stopping a carriage between Florence and Globe, Arizona. Pearl and Joe emerge from their hiding place, brandishing their guns and ordering the driver to stop. When Joe points his gun at the driver, Pearl forces the passengers off the carriage, forcing them to empty their bags and purses. Pearl and Joe made about $450 and a revolver. The couple then happily ordered the passengers back into the car, with Joe shooting in the air and telling the driver to go fast and not reveal anything. The vast, desolate desert terrain was beyond a pre-planned plan. Despite their best efforts, they quickly lost their way as they rode across the craggy hills. Too tired, they had to set up camp in a grove of trees and fell asleep by the small fire. But they don't know that they are being watched. Sometime later, when they woke up, they were surrounded by the sheriff and his team. They were quickly arrested and taken to Globe Prison. While behind bars, Pearl has become a phenomenon. People come from far and wide just to get a glimpse of the Queen of Bandits, even once. The infamous nickname that people gave her. Pearl entertains fans who love her, signing autographs and telling stories of her exploits. After almost a month, she escaped from prison on October 12, 1899, along with another prisoner named Ed Hogan. But their freedom was short-lived. Pearl was quickly recaptured and sent back to prison, where she stood trial in Florence in November of the same year. Throughout the trial, Pearl maintained a tough stance, insisting that the court had no jurisdiction over her. She may have admitted her guilt, but her attorney argued that the jury should consider her predicament. After all, she just robbed a carriage to send money to her ailing mother. Pearl's trial judge, Fletcher Doane, was completely outraged by the verdict, calling her ... He wasted no time replacing the jury and charging her again, this time with illegal gun possession. Pearl's charm didn't work this time. She was found guilty and sentenced to 5 years long-term in Yuma Territory Prison. Meanwhile, her accomplice, Joe Boot, received an even harsher sentence of 30 years for his role in the carriage robbery. Joe was taken to Yuma Prison, but in 1901, he managed to escape and was never seen or heard from again, and is said to have fled to Mexico. As for Pearl, she only became more popular in prison, where prison guards liked to show her off to tourists and reporters. Pearl even has a larger-than-average cell and many other perks. She is known as Lady Bandit, and her fame grows as she entertains visitors with her stories and poses for photos. After 18 months behind bars, Pearl was finally paroled on December 19, 1902, and moved to Kansas City, where she hoped to cash in on her notoriety. Her sister wrote a piece about her adventures in the West, which Pearl planned to profit from. However, her reputation quickly waned, and she disappeared from the public eye for several years until she was rearrested in Kansas City as Mrs. L.P. Keel for stealing. After that, Pearl disappeared again until 1924, when she visited the old courthouse in Florence where she was tried. There, she greeted a waiter with a smile and said nothing has changed. When he asks who she is, Pearl turns abruptly to the door and exclaims, "Pearl Hart, Bandit." Pearl Hart's life remains a mystery, with conflicting reports about her whereabouts in her later years. According to some historical data, she died in 1925 in Kansas City, where she ran a cigar shop. However, other reports suggested that she lived in San Francisco, California, and died there in 1952. In addition, it is generally believed that Pearl settled with a rancher in Dripping Springs, Arizona, with the name Pearl Bywater, and lived her last days there until her death in 1956. When we think about Pearl Hart's story, we see a woman who defies social norms and lives her own life. Her spirit and resilience have made her a legend. She remains a symbol of rebellion and independence, reminding us to never let anyone stop us from pursuing our dreams. Pearl Hart, Arizona's infamous Lady Bandit, may be gone, but her legacy lives on forever. Please like and share if you find the video content interesting and useful. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment below so as not to miss the upcoming interesting videos. Thanks for watching.